ビルはローは超音波デビルイヤーは地獄耳デビルウィングは空を飛びデビルビームは熱光線悪魔の力身につけた正義のヒーローデビルマンデビルマン
When you think of Megaten, you probably think of Megumi Shiraishi, if you're me. If not, you probably think of Kazuma Kaneko. Kazuma Kaneko is a man of mystery. Friends with the creator of JoJo, friends with Hideo Kojima, a lover of Western media, and someone who professed to reading the Bible for fun. Let's dig into who Kazuma Kaneko is. Kazuma Kaneko was born September 20th, 1964 in a sushi restaurant in Shimokitazawa, Tokyo, presumably the same one that his parents owned. He was also an only child. He lived just above the sushi shop his parents owned, and he also worked there for a short time. This is partially what he attributes to his reason for not enjoying sushi. As a kid, Kaneko was fascinated with mysterious phenomena and conspiracy theory, such as the Loch Ness Monster and UFOs. This fixation evolved into an interest in mythology and religion and conspiracy theory, with Kaneko reading many religious texts for leisure, citing the Book of Revelations as one of his favorites. He said after reading these, he started to form his own thoughts and opinions on them. This obsession with the occult Kaneko compares to how some people know they want to have kids and get married, and this is the same for him, that his calling was to learn about mythology and legends and researching them. He said that one of the downsides of living at a sushi restaurant is that he grew accustomed to seeing drunk adults. He also said that he's seen many dark things, such as his teacher doing lewd things to a little girl, the Yakuza hurting people, and this environment made him feel desensitized to these sorts of situations and the negative aspects of people. He says that this is partially why he tends to act coldly towards people he doesn't know. He said that seeing this side of humanity was like seeing on the other side of the veil, like seeing the man behind the curtain. Kaneko was always an artist. He said that his drawings in youth were dimensional and that this skill of drawing just came naturally to him. Kaneko entered many contests as a child, and his art typically won awards. He said he figured it was because he had a good mind for problem solving and guessing, saying that if he didn't become a rock star detective, then he could probably be a competent artist. He said he'd occasionally have painting teachers and professors come to his home just to suggest that he should hone his skill at their class. He often said that this came to a surprise to him, saying, "Oh, I'm talented?" It's not a big deal. He said that a lot of his skill from art came from practicing and imitating things that he liked. He said he would recall compositions he liked and reproduce them with ease. Kaneko said he won many competitions because he would consider the theme and calculated the best choice of style for that approach. He said his art at the time was reminiscent of manga from that era, and among his favorites were Devilman. But he also liked the works of Fujio Akatsuka and Shotaro Ishinomori. He even completed a piece of Kamen Rider that was so loved by his teachers that they actually put it on display when he was in the 3rd grade. He said that as a hobby, he would buy 1 or 2 books at a time, and over time, by the end of his stay at his parents' house, he gained over 600 books at his home. Among those would be manga like Kamen Riders, and he would get excited to talk about Kamen Rider with his friends. He said that he also began to be fascinated with Western literature, saying he read Martian Chronicles and 2001: A Space Odyssey, but he didn't like either of those. By his teen years, Kaneko stopped watching anime and reading manga.
Oh man! Oh god! Oh man! Oh god! Oh.
He said this was all an attempt to be more popular with girls. He also found himself getting into Western music and culture, and he would dress and act like Clint Eastwood in Dirty Harry, as well as eat hamburgers. Kaneko became infatuated with disco. By the time he was 19, the NES had come out, but he wasn't interested in it. He was instead still interested in the occult above all else. Kaneko had a somewhat active nightlife, stating he idolized Travolta and he wanted to be a dancer. He said that he would dress like he was in Saturday Night Fever and go dancing in Ueno. He said he'd typically get harassed by the way he dressed and he'd get into a lot of fights inevitably. However, he wasn't a fighter, so he'd often run away. By 20, Kaneko was an animator. His work in animation includes animating for the show The Gummy Bears and Saint Seiya. Kaneko said this job proved to be valuable in improving the quality of his line work and the speed at producing art. The main detracting factor of animation was the low pay, and alternatively, the game industry was starting to boom. After playing Megami Tensei 1, he decided that he wanted to join Atlus. And he did just that in 1988. His interview is actually where he first met Koji Okada. who was a programmer at the time. He explains that his first memory of Cozy was actually seeing him eating lunch in the back while Kaneko was being interviewed. Kaneko felt very lucky to be hired by Atlus because he never went to art school and was completely self-taught. This played into a self-professed inferiority complex he has held onto until the mid-90s, where he felt that he lacked an identity and things like color selection were a struggle for him. However, Kaneko loved Atlus. He praised them for their use of unusual representation of mythology and the fact that there was sex in their games. His first project being King of Kings, wherein he designed Lucifer, which would be reused in his Megaten work. Kaneko describes his early work as very clumsy and forced. He compared himself to that of a manga artist who won the Newcomer Prize and now has to learn how to do everything through working. Kaneko said he would often implement things like popular sneakers, t-shirts, and clothes that he loved but couldn't afford into his designs. This is something very apparent in his work later, especially with Persona, where you can see popular brands recreated in his art. The tools of the trade at the time that he used were Copic markers, and he also listened to dance music while he works, something he still does to this day. Kaneko was allowed a lot of freedom with his early designs. Kaneko explained it like so: Nintendo would complain about my designs a lot. Why is this monster naked? Then I'd explain to them that it would be weird if this monster wasn't naked. And then they would reply back, okay, we understand, please remove the nipple. Kaneko described his motivation for demon design as a fascination of the love of natural phenomena, as inspiration in reinterpreting the demons his own way was fun for him to fit into the game. One thing Kaneko reveled in was giving shape to lesser known mythologies. When designing a character, he typically worked closer with the writer of a given game to understand better what the character is. To Kaneko, it's important to design a person from a living world rather than a character from a video game, understanding who the person is and not wasting time on design elements that don't give us that info. He said that whenever he's drawing an emotional face on a character, he tends to have that same emotion on his face too, as a habit. He said that most of his work often reflects what he loved as a child, things like Lupin III, Blackjack, and Bruce Lee. Kaneko also said that he doesn't really like people looking at him while he's drawing. One thing that Kojima actually notes early on to his career is that he would often watch Kaneko drawing, to which he'd get shooed away. Kaneko also says that this is why he doesn't draw publicly or for fun, and why he has trouble improvising. In talking about things of his childhood, he found that he really quite liked shows like Key Hunter, Eiffel Daisaku-sen, and Playgirl, which are all very reminiscent of Devil Summoner, a series that he would later claim is his favorite series in the franchise. He generally liked how the shows that he was fond of would end in an apocalyptic way. He described how, as he was a child, he would read manga like Devilman and then would later read religious literature like the Book of Revelations and see parallels between the two, and appreciate how the manga integrated it. This left him motivated, saying that in 10 or 20 years, he'd love for players to look back at games he's made and go, oh, so that's what they were trying to say. Speaking of Devil Summoner, Kyoji Kuzunoa was inspired by Lupin III, Ace Ventura, and a few oddball detective shows from the West. Kaneko also cites Lupin and Bruce Lee as aesthetics for his personal fashion choices, and he cites Rei Reiho as one of his favorite characters. This list also includes Beth from SMT2, Takao from Nocturne, Maki from Persona 1, and Marie from Devil Summoner, as well as Tamaki Uchida from SMT If. Rei wears a Rokumansen choker, and Rokumansen is the fee required to pass the Sanzu River, which is supposed to indicate that she has a lack of fear of death and her coolness. She also wears a red hairband, and that's supposed to indicate her silliness. For early SMT, Kaneko had a lot to say about his designs for demons, particularly of what inspired the Messiah aesthetic, and that was a combination of the ideas of mecha components and elegant gothic aesthetics being combined. Gaians were designed as sneaky people, so then he decided to give them masks and braided hats. Satan in SMT2 has a leather jacket, and Kaneko says this is just to make him look like a bad boy. Kaneko states that there's many other Satans besides the SMT2 Satan, and that Satan is actually more of a phenomenon rather than a specific demon. The most popular Satan actually has 6 wings, 6 breasts, and 6 arms, by Kaneko's insistence. He also clarifies why Jack Ripper is part of the foul race. Kaneko says that Ripper strayed too far from the path of the fairies and became more like a bad cousin to the other 2 brothers. Kaneko says that Beth from SMT2 was designed to resemble the heroine from SMT1, and that Daleth was supposed to resemble the protagonist from SMT1, and that's why there's a nuance of green in his design. By 1996, Kaneko had transitioned to working on Mac and using a tablet as part of his design process. He would take a piece he'd done on paper, scan it, add lighting effects and filters, and finish off the images that way. Kaneko would even do stuff like that to images of himself. which is why there's so many silly images of Kaneko. In a previous video, I explained how he designed things for SNES era, so it's worth explaining how he completed his work digitally in the digital era. First, he draws on paper with pencil, then he takes several A4, which are roughly the size of standard printer paper in the West, and tape them together to complete a line drawing. He said the height of the image would generally be about 3.2 feet tall or 1 meter. Once Kaneko scanned, he would continue to work on the piece in sections. He would add color and paint in Painter, and then he would finish the work with some edits in Photoshop. He used to struggle with the concept of digital painting, but then once he realized that it's just painting is painting no matter what the media, he had an easier time finishing pieces. In terms of art meant for posters, cover art, etc., Kaneko said that he tries to think of the meaning and the theme of the piece and then complete it that way. In 1999, we saw a complete assimilation of Kaneko's art studio, which I explained in another video, but in summation, by this time, Kaneko relied on a team of about 3 to 4 other people in order to complete work. He also gave some of his workload to other staff to highlight them and give them a chance to grow. Kaneko released his Digital Devil Apocalypse book in 1999, which featured art by him and insight to who he is. Some highlights include that Kaneko loves animals, but his home in 1999 being too small for pets. Though in his childhood, a Yakuza who lived nearby had 3 shepherds with cool names like Sachi. He also adds that he would never name a dog something plain like Koro. He said that if he had a pet, it'd probably be a Shiba. He also mentions a love for mech, and he also mentions he's not too good at drawing robots. This is funny considering that from this time on, his art had quite a few more mech-based designs. He also mentions that he has quite a bit of cyborg figures and Spawn figures in his home, which is really interesting if you've seen Eric Ejecker's blog where they compare some of the designs Kaneko made, and one of them really resembles Spawn. Kaneko also explains the Zoma. The Zoma are Victor's attempts at making life, not necessarily like how Frankenstein's monster is, but rather life that can grow and evolve, and meant to exist similarly to Blade Runner's replicants. And this is why they tend to fuse into the hero race. He said Zoma were created also to attain the most beautiful form possible from Victor's point of view, rather than be useful. When asked what his idea of a beautiful robot would be, Kaneko said the most beautiful form for a robot would be spherical. When discussing cute designs, he says that he likes fear that a cute thing could suddenly bring by attacking you. He says impish designs are cute because they are mischievous, and that it's cuter when a facial expression doesn't change on the character. He also says he doesn't think kids are cute. 2000 was a year something pretty interesting happened. While Kaneko's work from this point appears to be all for Atlus and Atlus related work, such as books about Megaten, this is also where we get the first image of Raito, or at least who would become Raito. This proto-Raito appears for a promotional work for Fujimi Mystery Bunko, a shonen light novel publisher who is owned by the much larger Fujimi Shobo. In addition to this, Kaneko also contributed to art for a series called Jiken, though this would end with the publishing of the 4th book. Books 5 and 6 do not have Kaneko's art. This is also where something else special happened. Kaneko exhibited his art via a series of art shows called Kaneko World Exhibitions. Yes, for a period of time, you could see many of Kaneko's designs put together in a fashion-like museum. Kaneko spoke at these events, and it was described like a Kaneko-themed museum with over 100 drawings on display. In addition to school uniforms that appeared from each game, all types of trading cards released thus far, oversized prints, and other works that were hard to see appeared. This would also get a sequel called Kaneko World Exhibition 2, and the art displayed was updated to also feature Nocturne art. Both of these events featured official museum quality prints done by Arch, and those remain to be some of the most expensive Megaten merches on the market. Kaneko got to work on another project that wasn't Megaten, Mach X. Although it was a different game in many ways, Kaneko says this about the game. Truth be told, we have explored some aspects as much as we could in Megaten, but those good/evil, law/chaos dichotomies are still important, and we can't just give them up. I actually want to make a game that overflows with even more love, a world full of kindness and love. However, you can find several mistaken expressions of love in Mach X 2, but that's a sort of tough, painful love, right? This is a project he says he thoroughly enjoyed doing, and he had hoped to be able to do a sequel. He cited the excitement of working on a game that wasn't an RPG, and that he was very pleased with the result. Sadly, the game didn't get a sequel, as it performed pretty poorly. In 2003, Zone of the Enders: The Second Runner was released. Interestingly, this game features a few designs by Kazuma Kaneko. The way this all happened is that Kaneko went out drinking with Hideo Kojima from time to time. And during one of these times, Kojima thought it'd be cool if Kaneko designed a mech for him, because he knew Kaneko loved mech. He pitched the idea over some beer and Kaneko agreed. Kaneko ended up designing Lloyd and Inert. In early development, Kaneko got to take a look at Yoji Shinkawa's early designs, and Kaneko decided that he would make a mech that was weird and a character design that was unusual. Kaneko was given the direction of a ninja who used daggers and homing missiles and fought in darkness. This somewhat bothered Kaneko, who felt they had already pretty much designed the character. In the end, Kaneko's mech took inspiration from Danube Alpha 1 from Mazinger, GR2 from Giant Robo, and Black Ox from Tetsujin 28. So let's talk briefly about Nocturne. Kaneko decided to change up the summoning mechanic away from the comps because he thinks that it's boring to use the same mechanic each time. He was inspired by shamanism and he thought it would be striking if a tattooed half-demon would be the protagonist. The idea of a subtle change in the protagonist's appearance would emphasize the stripping away of his humanity, provide visual cues for the player, and to serve as a stigma. He was inspired by the Red Hot Chili Peppers as well for the design of the protagonist, imagining him running around the desert naked. Something not entirely different from what the gist of the game is. The Vortex world was Kaneko's idea as well. He combined ideas such as the Hollow Earth theory, the Gnostic structure of the sphere-themed universe, and he came away with a bizarre and fragmented Tokyo. Kaneko also talks a little bit about DDS. Kaneko came up with the eating aspect of the game, thematically and in terms of gameplay as well as some of the basis of the scenario. But he relinquished much of the duties to Yuga Dai and later Tadashi Satomi. According to Kaneko, his version of the game was much darker, and he regarded the game as being much lighter than initially planned. For the DDS characters, Kaneko felt their transformations had to emphasize the eating aspect, so their mouths became prominent and their eyes were removed as he felt it stood out too much. Kaneko returned to Mecha in 2004 with art contributions to Super Robot Encyclopedia version 2004, where he produced a nice piece of the mech god Sigma, and later in 2005 he contributed to Super Robot Wars 3, wherein he designed 3 mechs, Workbow, Kaiser Ephes, and Dis Astranagan's. Finally, in promotion for Super Robot Wars, Kaneko produced a poster featuring the mech Robo Combattler V. Another small contribution Kaneko made to games outside of Mega 10 would be this card for the game Sangokushi Taisen for the DS. In 2008, Kaneko addresses why he wasn't involved with Persona 3. He says that he didn't want to push his views or anything onto Persona and wanted to let the younger staff grow and gain experience. He said Persona is meant to be lighter than mainline and to be for a much wider audience, and having someone other than himself work on it facilitates this. Unsurprisingly, Raito has a lot of content regarding interviews from Kaneko about the 2 games, as again, Devil Summoner is Kaneko's favorite series. Kaneko says the theme for the Raito games is passion, and meant to be a beacon of hope and a direct reaction to the state of Japan in regards to tax increases, declining birth rates, rising unemployment rates, etc., etc. He said he wanted the game to be an energetic motivation for Japan to do its best. At first, they considered it being a handheld game. By the time the game's design started to come into fruition, they decided that it would much better suit the PS2. The story itself was thought up by Kaneko way back in the development for Soul Hackers. Kaneko also pushed for Raito to deviate from the form of traditional RPG, and the Japanese title for the first game is actually Devil Summoner Raito Kuzunoa versus the Superpower Core. Kaneko came up with this name in order to be something that stands out with a monster movie vibe, and the game's box art was supposed to be a kind of nod to 007's Dr. No. For Strange Journey, Kaneko designed the Demonica as something that would be easy to remember and easy to copy and draw. This is the game that Kaneko compared to adult Pokemon. He said that when you are done with Pokemon, you should try this game. Kaneko is also the one who thought of the name Strange Journey, having thought the word journey embodies the game, and it reminded him of a band he used to love, Journey, and he felt that the word embodied experience and growing as well as travel. And since it's a strange game, he felt that Strange Journey embodied the game. Kaneko said he requested that John Carpenter's Thing should serve as the basis for the story and atmosphere. Another one of Kaneko's contributions to the game design was the password system. He had hoped that this would result in people swapping passwords, and it would incentivize building powerful demons just to share and brag. After the release of Strange Journey, this is where Kaneko withdrew even further. Now with SMT4 being made with a fraction of a story he wrote, many of the design pitches and story changes that were suggested were also rejected by Kaneko. He also designed Belder for Devil Survivor, and as of now hasn't contributed new art to Atlus. Though in 2017, Kaneko did contribute a cover art for a historical manga series where he drew Oda Nobunaga. He didn't seem to leave Atlus, however, with credits in Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal as a modeling supervisor, the former including Megumi Shiraishi, who also worked on Persona 3 and Persona 4. Now here's a list of some of Kaneko's favorites. Kaneko's favorite demons are Mothman, Hachiman, Ba, Taki Minakata, Vishnu, Frost Ace. And his favorite colors are gold and silver. He's also afraid of ghosts, by the way. His favorite hobby is researching the occult. His favorite foods are pasta and pizza. He's a Virgo and he is type O blood. And that's all I have to say about Kaneko. I glossed over a lot of his body of work because even though I read tons of interviews, none of them really gave a lot of insight to his headspace or gave any real commentary specific to those games. Kaneko tends to ramble. Kaneko has bizarre sense of humor. So for this video, I tried to make sure that I focused on making sure that we understood how Kaneko felt and thought, rather than focus on his weird quirks like smoking 100 cigarettes a day. I hope that you now see Kaneko as more of a human rather than some sort of deity. And yeah, I didn't touch on his departure from Atlus because, like I said, he hasn't left Atlus. I also neglected to mention that Kaneko has a weird name history. The second game to credit Kaneko is Dungeon Explorer, and Dungeon Explorer credits him as Kinko K Kaneko. But in Maniac Pro Wrestling, Cosmo Tank, Surprise Man, World Fierce Fighting Holy Warrior, New York Yankees, Mesopotamia, SMT1, and Majin Tensei 1, he's credited as Kazuhiro Kaneko. I believe that this may be his given name, and Cosmo might be an alias or something he changed his name to later on. However, one game does credit him as Kameoka Kaneko, and I have no idea why. I will probably have an addendum to this video, but I didn't read all the interviews I had available. Shout out to my buddy Bo, who provided me scans for several interviews that don't appear online anywhere. That's it for the video. Goodbye, fellow Mega Tennis.
デビルヤーは地獄にデビルウィングは空を飛びデビル B は熱光線悪魔の力身につけた正義のヒーローデビルマンデビルマン